I just have the great pleasure of welcoming our panel and indeed our moderator, Francis Fitzgerald, who is one of those people who literally needs no introduction, but just thank you very much, Francis, for being with us. The topic of the discussion today is developing a life sciences vision for Ireland, the EU agenda. You're all very welcome, but particularly our colleagues from J&J who are partnering with us in this event, Fergus Sharp and Brita O'Reilly. It's a real pleasure to have you here. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Francis and you might introduce the panel.
I will, of course. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. And thank you all for being here. And can I say a big thank you to Johnson & Johnson for supporting today and being here with us, and to the IIEA. They're topical as always. And really this discussion, it's a very appropriate time for it for all sorts of reasons, not least the EU policy that we know is out there, the work on the Irish strategy for life sciences, the upcoming Irish presidency, which hopefully will give us opportunity to delve into more detail in this area. And it may well coincide with some of the further EU legislation that's needed. Critical area for us, as we know, from all points of view, from an economic point of view, job creation, employment obviously key in this area, the possibility of really developing our leadership within Europe. And of course, at the end of the day, it is about creating a society that's better for everyone, that's healthier, that meets the needs of people in our health service and beyond. So a really interesting and important topic for us to discuss today. So I've got a great panel here with a lot of expertise, varying between focusing on Ireland specifically, and then Ireland in the EU context, and then also looking at European developments and how do we fit. And the big question, of course, of innovation, competition. How do we keep innovation in Europe? How do we compete? How do we keep Europe competitive? The very big question. So a great panel. I'm going to introduce them in more detail before I turn to them individually, but it's Maurice O'Connor, Anouk de Vries. Thank you for being here with us from Brussels today, although you have responsibility for a very wide area. Darren from the National Institute for Bioprocessing Research and Training. But we're first of all joined by Pilar Aguar Fernandez, who's joining us from Brussels today. You're very welcome, Pilar. She took up the role of Director at People, Health and Society at DG Research and Innovation in the European Commission at the start of September. So a lot on your plate, and you really want to position with the new strategy the EU as the world's most attractive place for life sciences by 2030. So we're looking forward very much to your presentation. Pilar, you have a lot of experience, both in Brussels and indeed in Spain. So we look forward very much to hearing what you have to say in our introductory remarks from you today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this warm welcome. And I must say, let me start by saying something personal, very personal. Actually, before I knew I was taking over this position, I had registered for it in my former capacity. Yes, you see, life is very interesting. And I even planned to attend in person, because my previous position, the one I just left, as you say, from the 1st of September, I'm back in Brussels, was working for the European Commission, but in a place that some of you may recognize or may know, in a place called Grange, called very close to Trim. So I was a county meet girl for 4.5 years, in a way, where the European Commission has an office dealing, a directorate dealing with food and health analysis and audits. So as you can see, I'm really pleased to present the life science vision today, because in a way, I think that Ireland has been part of my professional background and still is very close to my heart. So, but as you said, I am back now to DG Research, and it's my pleasure to introduce you to the life science strategy for Europe. Let me hope, well, I apologize in advance because I think I have an issue with the computer, so I may not see you while I'm presenting. So again, apologies for this, but let's see if we can go to the real thing now. Let's see, slideshow, in theory should be putting up. Okay, so here we are. So strategy for European life science. As you have mentioned just a minute ago, life science are really key to sustain the quality of life and the well-being in Europe for the people of Europe. But not only that, they really are also crucial for our the quality of our environment, an issue that you may be familiar with, the strategic autonomy, preparedness of crisis, and for accelerating our twin digital and green transition. It has been said already, but we have to indeed make the point, particularly for Ireland, that is a sector that has a significant impact in the economy in terms of R&D, business expenditure, in terms of the contribution to the GDP and employment. And those are the figures that I'm sharing with you that are true for the whole totality of Europe. I've checked also the figures for Ireland, and there's a small bias towards the medtech sector in all. But anyway, Ireland is a country that is doing quite well in this. As you have all heard in the Draghi report, there are recommendations for strengthening the single market. We need to do that in order to boost our competitiveness and also to be prepared for crisis. Those are opportunities where the life science area are providing us with tools. So those are really let's say, the starting thoughts of these. But what we talk when we talk about life science, what do we mean? It's much broader than what people would think at the beginning, because sometimes we have to kind of little small bias to think about it in terms of always health. Yes, but just no. As you see, there are many areas where we can deliver new generation technology and products, and they go from, yes, the health part, which is of course very, very important, but also on areas related to food, agriculture and fisheries, bio-based solution, or the environment. And it is fair to say that life science is really revolutionizing some of those fields. We need them to tackle challenges. We need them to really maintain our healthy populations. We need them to protect and restore the environment, and even to reduce the environmental footprint of different products. So those are things that we absolutely must exploit better, because the truth is that EU has been so far very, very strong on the important action. Let me just go again to my slides. So, as it was very kindly said, our aim is to position the EU as the world's most attractive place for life science by 2030. So basically by tomorrow. Okay, so it is very, very complicated. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy task to complete, but there is one thing that we know. We know that we can't and we don't want to do it alone. We need to have coordinated action from across the entire life science value chain. And when I see that, I say from the early stages of the research and innovation to market access and deployment, but also something that maybe sometimes we tend not to take into consideration, which is the user uptake for these safe and sustainable products. And this means also working very, very closely, all of us, member states, regions, the EU level, private, public sector, all of us have a say on the matter, including patients, associations, and professionals from healthcare. So, as you can see here, there are three interconnected phases: optimizing the RNI ecosystem, ensuring the rapid market access, and boosting the trust and uptake of this innovation. Again, those are the areas that we see we need to work together with all of you present in around the table today. And for that, what we have done is we have identified flagship actions, actions where we really want to pay special attention and be specifically active. So in the life sciences strategy, there are 27 actions, out of which 11 have been marked as flagship actions. So those are very high priority for us, and you can see them in here. I think that maybe I can take you through some of them, but clinical research investment plan. Why? Because we know that this is an area where the multi-country clinical trials are not happening at the pace we would want to see. And if clinical trials or clinical research doesn't happen, innovation doesn't happen in the health domain. So this is an area where we absolutely must act. And I know that Ireland has invested significantly in the last years, strengthening the national clinical trials infrastructure, but other member states have done so, and it's our role now to basically support all of these networks and make sure that we coordinate them better, to make sure also that there is more access to these clinical trials. The network of the ATMP centers of excellence. Why? Because in the field of advanced therapies, so I should have not put ATMP, I should have put advanced therapies or advanced therapy medicinal products. But in the field of advanced therapies, there are excellent centers, the really, really top-notch centers. But what is missing is the opportunity to have them even performing better. And the idea is that to break this isolation or this centers isolation, we would establish this network of center of excellence to really make sure that industry has also access to this wealth of knowledge. So, and again, promoting a holistic approach to the life science with One Health approaches. For One Health, let me say one thing, easy said than done, because the issue with One Health is that it is, I think that everybody understands what we're talking about. However, because it touches human, animal, and environmental health areas, everyone has a different vocabulary. Disciplines are not really that working that well together. And what we would like to do in this respect is to create a bit of guidance on how these One Health approaches apply to research and innovation would happen. Something also very interesting, the microbiome initiative. As you know, there's growing evidence that in the area of microbiome there is this very, very high potential to very promising potential for a number of applications, and we would really like to tap into that potential, if I may say. Up to September as well, there were a lot of initiatives that were done by the colleagues in research dealing with that part, which was had an exceptional leader, which was John Bell, an Irish national that has also just retired. Climate change and health, research and innovation agenda, and finally in this slide, the idea that to really harness this life science strategy and make it fruitful, we do need to unlock the power of data and of artificial intelligence for this innovation. And what I mean by that is pretty simple, but very, very complex to tackle, because we know that life science produces an enormous amount of data. They are very much data-driven sciences, but there are different interlocutors in different member states. Data formats are very difficult. They are different regimes. They are not well interconnected. They are not interoperable. And this all creates really a lot of hurdles, including legal uncertainty. So the idea is to bring together all the authorities that are involved in these regulatory frameworks to see how could we achieve better harmonization that would really help research. Let me go through some of the last flagship actions. So life science career development, because we do need to strengthen skills and careers in this area. And this is an area where obviously attracting the best talents and adequately equip this life science scientists is critical. If we don't have skilled workforce and researchers, we will certainly not be able to promote all the other actions. On this, I know first-hand experience. I know how well positioned Ireland is, but we need to bring all the member states together to really push for improving these opportunities, promoting responsive regulation. And here I'm pretty sure that some people around the table knows very well or firsthand that, well, there is there are a number of hurdles in the current regulatory landscape for the biotech sector, because it's really a research driven, a very fast moving field, and it is pretty obvious that perhaps there are also areas on this regulation that or the regulatory landscape where we can do much better. So the colleagues in DG Santé are working on the EU Biotech Act with a lot of support from our side, because the idea there is to create an enabling environment that would accelerate the transition from products from lab to the raw factory and then to the market, will of course maintaining the high safety standards that are trademark of EU products. So in this respect, I don't have to say much about also the second point on the regulatory part, because around the table and are many of the experts that know firsthand as well that there is room for simplification and improvement on the medical devices and in vitro diagnostics regulation. This is being looked at, as you also know, and I am very confident that the colleagues are working very, very hard to bring these improvements to fruitful to a fruitful initiative even by the end of this year. So I'm confident that this will happen pretty soon. Something which is not necessarily only for life science, but in general, in what we see when we talk about research in Europe, is access to funding. So we want to, for the life sciences, we want to really overcome this hurdle, because particularly in this field, the startups are really finding difficulties to have access to private investment in particular. So in this, the colleagues in the European Innovation Council, they are looking really into how to bring potential investors to their portfolio of science companies, and they have something which is called the Trusted Investor Network, which is going to be really going to be on top for this life science. Finally, something that is also has got a lot of attention from the colleagues all over the Commission, but I think that even beyond that, we have promised to have a kind of extended governance, and we are very, very keen on having very good stakeholders engagement. So one of the flagship actions is the creation of a life science coordination group. Let me explain to you why or how does it work. So we have realized that in a number of member states, they have certain structures that allow to coordinate teams working in different ministries or departments to work together on matters that are related to life science. So that was quite inspiring. And together this with the call by the stakeholders during, we had a call for evidence. So the stakeholders that replied to that call for evidence also mentioned in a lot of their responses the need for this coordination group. So we will have an internal structure across the Commission services where we will ensure the coherence between the different policies and the different actions and the funding activities or other activities that we take into consideration. And there will be, this needs of course to be yet developed, but there will be, the group will work with external stakeholders, external actors, both in the private and the public sectors, to identify the challenges, to see the opportunities, and to make these a reality. So I think that I'm, reaching the end of my presentation. I would really be pleased to hear how you see the involvement and engagement, not only at the national level, but also at the European level, or in particular areas that you are certainly interested. And let me just see. So I'll try my best, although I'm not very good. So Guruma Yahud, good? Did I say it well?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
I'll try my best. As I say, my contimate accent can be improved.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for that very helpful overview of the policy at EU level. You've covered such a wide range there. And of course, we all know that the policy is incredibly important, but it's actually the actions and the implementation that will make a real difference. And you've outlined all the areas where action is needed. Just before I go ahead, a few housekeeping rules to say, if anybody's watching, we know there are a lot of people signed up to join the discussion online. They can use the Q&A function on Zoom to put in questions, and we'll get to those later. And obviously, for any of you in the room, please just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you, and just say who you are and who you're representing here. And I should say too that today's presentation and Q&A is on the record. And please do tag the IIEA and Johnson & Johnson, Innovative Medicines Ireland, if you want to continue the conversation on social media. So I'm now going to turn to Mirish O'Connor, who's the Assistant Secretary at the Department of Health, Head of Research and Development and Health Analytics. And of course, the Department of Health is a very important part of the strategy that we need in life sciences going forward. But of course, a very key part will be the working cross-department as well, Mirish, and you might address that later. But to begin with, what I wanted to ask you, given that we're developing the life sciences strategy here, how do you see this aligning with what we've heard from Pilar in terms of the European strategy for life sciences? And what are the opportunities and indeed the challenges for Ireland as we face into developing our own strategy? And where do you see the opportunity in what Pilar was saying for Ireland?
Thank you, Frances. And thank you, Pilar, for the excellent presentation. I was struck by the great responsibility you carry. If I read, you're Director for People, Health and Society across Europe. So we support you. We support you in that. No, it's excellent. Ireland strongly welcomes the Commission's strategy for European life sciences, and we will absolutely proactively work to support implementation. I don't think I've ever read a European paper that resonated so strongly. I would describe the alignment with Ireland's sort of ambition and Ireland's interests as total. And the timing, I think, is ideal for us, as you say, as we move to fulfill the Programme for Government commitment to develop our own national strategy. So we share the Commission's view that this is an area of strategic opportunity for Europe. And it's an area in which we in Ireland, and I think we across Europe, have strong and solid foundations. And this can be seen in certainly the pharma and medtech industry in Ireland and in elsewhere across Europe. The strong academic foundations, the investments in research, the fusion of academia and enterprise that we have sort of worked with in clusters here resonates very strongly. The Commission's analysis speaks of a research and innovation ecosystem, and I think that highlights the breadth of the life sciences that was Pilar brought out very clearly. And this requires us to work collectively across government as well as between governments. And I would say working across government is something we were not always good at. But I think, I don't know, Brexit in particular and other things has really improved our capacity in Ireland, I think, to function across governments. And I think any challenge worth undertaking spans way beyond the breadth of any one department. So here in Ireland, our enterprise department, and Emma Jane Morgan is with us here, will lead on our national strategy. But as Pilar says, it pulls in agriculture, health, de-ferrous in particular. And as I say, the strategy talks about the importance of data, the importance of skills, the importance of regulation. And it aligns very well with other aspects of European law and the European health data space. It is already being implemented. Denmark is currently in the presidency, and I had the pleasure to be in Copenhagen at the European Health Ministers meeting at the start of the week. And literally, it was very practical and concrete discussions about moving forward on upscaling our performance in clinical trials, consolidating all the rigmarole that goes into organizing a clinical trial, centralized research, ethics, approvals, and so forth, and working towards a kind of a multi-country platform for that. Simplification is a theme, and agility is a theme, as you'll know, across Europe, and that's one that we would want to progress through our presidency. I think in the Draghi report and that there can be a kind of a pessimism around Europe's future, which I think is unjustified in this space. I think we have really strong foundations and a kind of a determination to work together to maintain the strong place we have. Just finally, as Peter says, we have our presidency in whatever, less than a year now, and much of this will fall to us to lead on. The Biotech Act, it feels like, I'm interested, Pilar, in the timing of the Biotech Act, but it certainly will be one that will be live, and maybe simplification of medtech and diagnostic regulation and clinical trials. Ireland stands ready to move forward with the rest of Europe in these areas. Thank you.
Great, Mirish, thank you very much indeed. And I suppose one thing that strikes me listening to you is how, and to Pilar, is how do we accelerate all of these actions? We're well positioned, but it's the acceleration, isn't it, in order to be competitive, and they're working cross-department, particularly, I suppose, particularly in relation to the development of the strategy.
Yes, yeah. And I think in health, like when I see the strengths we have in our enterprise base, in academia, it hurts me to admit, I would say one of our weaknesses right now is our national health data isn't as sort of established as it should be. And we're investing in that, and we're working through the European health data space to progress that. We are committed to establishing summary care records for all Irish people, consistent with European standards, and that will provide the foundation for secondary data analysis for population level research. So we recognize we are shoring up that and then working with other departments too.
Okay, thank you, Mirish. Let me move on to another guest here today, Anouk de Vrouet, who's the Head of Government Affairs and Policy at Johnson & Johnson, with responsibility for a very wide area, Europe, Middle East and Africa. We're delighted you've joined us today, and can I take this opportunity to thank Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine Ireland for your trust in Ireland and your investment in Ireland over a long period, with 6,000 employees and many plants throughout across many counties. So we're delighted to have you here today, bringing your experience, your very wide experience as Head of Government Policy for Johnson & Johnson, as I say. And you've led policy engagement across the region since 2021. And you joined J&J in 2016 as Senior Director for Government Affairs and Policy after more than a decade involved in other arenas linked to your current post. So I won't go into all the details of your CV, but suffice it to say we're delighted to have you here today and look forward to hearing what you have to say in relation to the perspective of Johnson & Johnson and where to in the future in life sciences, a big question.
Thank you very much, Frances. And actually, my very first job was in the European Commission. working in the department that was responsible for the European Medicines Agency at the very beginning. So it's actually a couple of decades ago, but I shouldn't say that probably. But no, thank you very much for having me here. And I think this discussion on the life science strategy is not only timely, I think it's really urgent. And it's urgent, and I'm not going to quote too many numbers, but I know from our industry association, FPA, that based on their analysis, 25% of Europe's share of clinical R&D is now happening elsewhere in the world. And I think that says already a lot. I would also like to take a step back, because the life science sector, if we want to be successful, as you were saying, from the lab to the patient, we need to look at it in a broader context. And we need to look at it in really the global value of health context also, because investment in health is too often seen as a cost. And as long as we don't shift that paradigm, I'm afraid the life science sector will not be able to be successful. But that's where we come in, and Johnson & Johnson both has medical devices and pharmaceuticals. I work in the pharmaceutical sphere, but if I can, I'm happy to take questions on medical devices as well, but it's not my specialty area. I can say that, as a sector, we have had a track record in the life science and health approvals. If you just look at HIV, hepatitis C, 95% of patients can be cured today. This would not have been possible without pharmaceutical innovation, and we shouldn't forget that. And that's because of the investments that governments have been willing to make in the past, and that needs to continue, because those investments are not just for the patient, it is also for the broader economy, because, we see, for instance, in cancer patients today, 3/4 of them continue to work while they are on treatment. That's amazing. That's really not how it used to be, so we need to continue to do that. Now, to respond more specifically to your question, what can Europe do with the life science strategy on this? I would love to see, for instance, the European semester process, which is, for those that are not familiar with it, the budget cycle that Europe has with the member states, to move from a purely procedural thing to one that prioritizes what matters. And I think every individual will agree that health is what matters. So why is health in these budget cycles and investment in health and hence innovation always deprioritized? So that is something I hope this new strategy could bring. And I know that hope is not a strategy, so we'll have to work together to get there. And secondly, the Biotech Act, you referred to that as well. It really, because our sector has just gone through quite a lot of European legislation impacting us. And these legislation discussions have started at a different time when we were not in the context we are in today. Now we all know the global context we are in. So this Biotech Act, we have to get it right. And getting it right means not adding more legislation and complexity, but taking that out. And I think you've also mentioned that already. So maybe I'll stop there for now. I have other things I would love to say, but I'm sure I'll get a chance later on.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Nick. And very interesting points you make about how much we focus on the cost of health as opposed to the real outcomes and the frame with which this is often discussed. And that's something for us to perhaps take up. And how the new legislation, how it's going to be framed. Is it going to free up, or are you a little worried that it might be too, if you like, heavy, too top-down heavy? Is that a worry you have about the Biotech Act or the EU for Health?
I think we're hopeful on the Biotech Act, and we've been getting very positive signals from the European Commission and the member states involved that that's the intent, that a big intent is simplification, and it's one of your flagship initiatives, but that hopefully will not just be only about medical devices. That's great that that's in there, but there's simplification in the clinical trials environment. There's simplification in getting permits for new plans that we, for instance, want to have. There's other areas where simplification could be possible. And I think the second piece, there's maybe room also for more incentivizing of innovation as well. I mean, in the previous legislation that we're now finishing soon, the pharmaceutical package, those incentives haven't really come through heavily. So maybe here there's openness to rediscuss that.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can take that up in the discussion. We'll go on to our next guest speaker, and that's Darren Morrissey, Darren is the CEO of the National Institute for Bioprocessing Research and Training in UCD premises, but independent, right? He's emphasized that very much to me earlier. And you've held that role since 2020, leading the organization's mission to support global biopharma manufacturing through advanced training and research. And you were previously the CEO of the Health Research Board and also obviously Director of Programs at Science Foundation Ireland. So a great background, and we're very interested to hear your perspective, I suppose, on how the EU Life Sciences Strategy will shape policy here in Ireland so that we stay competitive and innovative and all the things that we know are required, not just in Ireland, of course, but right across Europe, given the statistics that are a little bit concerning when we compare with America. Despite the great progress and the great economic impact here in Ireland and across Europe, there's still a lot of potential. So perhaps you'd give us your views, Darren, on how we make the very best of this European strategy in Ireland over the coming years. And maybe you're going to focus on this from the perspectives solely of Ireland, right?
I wouldn't say solely of Ireland. Ireland for the benefit of Europe, right? So,
yeah,
Francis,
I should have said that.
Thank you for the intro.
Yeah.
And I think I'll short circuit the National Institute of Blah Blah by saying NIBRT. NIBRT is what we go by. But essentially what we are is a biopharmaceutical manufacturing focused research and training centre established by IIEA Ireland around 16, 17 years ago. So we're relatively new, but we've played a big role in that important sector and industry. I'll pick up on a couple of words that you used a few times across previous questions. You spoke about this EU life science strategy being really welcome, but you spoke about implementation and you spoke about acceleration. And to that, I would add another key word from an Irish perspective, which is, you know, when it comes to accelerating and implementing, you also need a degree of focus. And focus, from my perspective, I'll make no apologies to say that Ireland should be focusing on areas of key strength. Now, Ireland has great strength across the life science sector in research in areas like microbiome, which Pilar spoke about, immunology, genetics research, very strong kind of capabilities in medtech as an industry sector, but also how, you know, that crosses over with academia and research. I will advocate very strongly for the whole area of biotechnology and biopharmaceutical research. I'll make no apologies. I probably won't mention the others for the rest of this discussion. Biopharma is a really important sector for Ireland for obvious reasons. Lots of FDI, foreign direct investment. It currently accounts for about 25% of GDP. That is a threat that we're obviously listening to a lot at the moment in respect of, you know, geopolitical changes and whatnot. But it is also a huge strength for Ireland and is a huge strength for Europe as well. And when you think about when you think about manufacturing, you know, I probably lose 90% of the audience because no one's kind of interested in manufacturing, heavy lifting, you know, industrial processes. But biopharmaceutical manufacturing is a different animal. I mean, you're talking about the harnessing of biotechnology, which is lab work, which is molecular biology, which is all of the great advances we've made in the last 20, 25 years to produce medicines. And the manufacturing processes in biopharma are not static things. They're constantly evolving. They're evolving to try and take costs out of medicines. So you harness the capabilities of your genetic engineering, your biotech, but you also harness the capabilities of your tech. So increasingly AI is playing a role, automation is playing a role. Put them together, you're accelerating drug production, you're accelerating and reducing drug costs. Now that's a potential, and I know it's only a part of the story, but that's what you're focused on. And even more important than that, you're actually using that technology to develop new medicines. So before, when you discovered a new chemical, you figured out how to make it, and then you pretty much had a static process forevermore. In a biotechnology, you can utilize tech to produce very bespoke and personalized treatments, things like cell therapies, gene therapies, and going from there to getting them into a patient actually in active use is a much shorter process. You need agility, you need flexibility. At Nibert, we do a lot of that. We train people on highly regulated manufacturing processes. We currently have 50,000 people working in the industry in Ireland. These are not heavy lifters. These are high-tech manufacturing focused individuals. And we also at Nibert do a lot of the research on ironing out the kinks of the manufacturing process. Sounds easy, but consider your COVID vaccine back 5 years ago. Consider the -80-degree storage issue with mRNA, which is a biologic molecule, or a biology-based molecule. Storing at -80 is a manufacturing issue. And that's the type of work that Nibert does, is taking that -80 storage to room temperature storage, which of course, takes the cost out of the medicine, but then also cascades it around the world in terms of transportability and so on. So I suppose I'm advocating strongly that we consider Ireland's real strengths there within the context of the EU strategy, the life science strategy. How do you do that? My view is you look at the areas that Pilar spoke about. So things like the ATMP centers of excellence. What are they? It's a good question. What are they? They're written down in a strategy. We need to implement them. So ATMPs are advanced therapies. They're advanced therapeutic medicinal products. That's what the regulatory term is. Essentially, they are cell therapies, your gene therapies, and your so on. Ireland can and should be playing a role in those within the context of the expertise that we've built up over the last 20 years or so in biopharma manufacturing and biotech. You have bioclusters, EU bioclusters. Again, what are EU bioclusters? That needs to be interpreted. It needs to be worked out. And then we need to figure out the role that Ireland plays and harness that capability in tandem with other biocluster locations around Europe. Spain, particularly Catalonia, very strong in the area. Belgium, very strong in the area. Denmark, very strong in the area. So I suppose at this point, what I'm saying is, I think we need to get real and get focused. And we need to consider the role that Ireland can play through our areas of strength to then help and deliver for Europe as well. Because I will acknowledge that Draghi can sometimes be interpreted as a very pessimistic report. The reality of the situation is that in the world of biopharma, biotech, Europe accounts for 20% of the new molecules and the new products in development currently, of which there are thousands. 40% are in the US, 40% in the Far East and China. So we are behind the curveball. That's very big, mixing my terms there. I've invented a new term. We're behind the curveball, and we need to get real, and we need to get focused. And so things like competitiveness really sit behind medicine's resilience. And I bring it back to COVID. So during COVID, we realized in Europe that we did have a deficit, and the deficit wasn't smart people. It wasn't innovative thinking. It boiled down to manufacturing. That's what it boiled down to. So I'll maybe stop there and we'll keep the conversation going.
Okay, excellent. So some provocative thoughts there. Can I come back to you immediately and say, what are the barriers? What do you think? I mean, you've described what we need to do, the strengths we have, the potential that's there. What, in terms of, say, collaboration or that focus you're talking about, where do you see the leadership on that needing to come from? And what would you say are the key barriers, just to give us a flavor of your thinking on that?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, the Irish government, when it created Nibert, set in train a series of actions that were like a snowball. You couldn't have made it up. You couldn't have planned for it necessarily. 150 million euro went in, over the years, and there's been success. Like everything, the barriers are going to be multifaceted, and you need to think about them all. I think first and foremost for me, it will always come down to, for my research funding colleagues in the audience, it does come down to a level of funding. And I think research funding, and particularly focused large-scale research funding, is very important. So you talk, again, I mentioned bioclusters. What does that mean? Where's the funding coming from? How do you make it happen? So funding is one thing. I think that creating an environment where the industry, big and small, can collaborate very closely with the innovators who can be in universities, but they can be other places as well. They can be in small startup companies, creating that kind of atmosphere and environment. Ireland has been very successful in that regard, by the way, but I think Europe can get better at it, and it can take down some of the, maybe, I don't want to label it as bureaucracy, but sometimes that exists. I do think that, I mean, there's great ambition in the New Horizon Europe funding that I'm hearing about in terms of the level of budget there. So that would certainly impact things. There is also something around regulatory bureaucracy, which we need to look at as well. That's where your molecules that are in development need to get through the regulatory steps really quickly. In the Far East, they're excellent at that. You need to have the balance as well, and I'm conscious of that when I highlight that, Murish. So they would be three things.
Okay, Murish, how would you? Anouk, you do come in. Yes.
If I may, but I go first as well. I don't want to jump.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it looks like you had my notes, because I also had focus and mindset as one of the as one of the main points. And I think that also means that we shouldn't try to do too much if we want to, get things done and start what matters most. And that is a little bit what I'm sometimes worried about when I see these plans, that there is so much in there to, at the end, probably please everybody a little bit, but at the end, nobody will be happy. So how can we really focus and have the mindset on those things that matter? And I think you mentioned already a lot of those. I also would like to maybe bring in there something Pilar said, that we need to look at it end to end. And that means barriers from the lab to the patient. And I think there, on the terms of the patient side and getting quick access to the treatments when they are found safe and efficacious is something the whole of Europe should work to. And there I would also hope that countries that are big champions like Ireland, but also my own country, Belgium, of pharmaceutical innovation, that they also become champions in providing that rapid access to patients. For me, that is one of the things that seems to be missing, where I see less of a role for Europe as the European Union to play a role, other than making sure member states invest, but where every government should have that as a top priority as well.
That's such an important point, and I'll come back to Pilar in a moment, just after hearing from Irish on your response to that need for, for focus and acceleration.
I would absolutely support the points made, and I think NIBRD is a wonderful example of what we can do extremely well. That interface between academia and enterprise is fantastic, and it's one of our great strengths. I've had just personal reasons to dive in around CAO options in higher education. And I was in higher education for a decade in career, worked very closely with Philip and others. But must say, phenomenally impressed with the relevance, the sharpness of the sort of portfolio programs that are available. MedTech is particularly strong coming through in terms of undergraduate options, and I think that responsiveness of our higher education system is one of our strengths. We have pockets of excellence, I think, and I think there's many European member states are in a similar boat, and the challenge, as the other panelists have said, is upscaling, getting over ourselves. We're very precious about our arrangements for ethical approval, and each side thinks they do it just right, So it's about Ireland readying ourselves to perform on a bigger stage. I think we have the skills for it, and we just need to bring a coherent, coordinated national infrastructure onto the European stage. And we're moving on that already, even ahead of the development of life sciences strategy. There's clinical trials sort of recommendations, a commitment to double clinical trials, to have a single kind of arrangement for ethical approval, and to have all those sort of the bureaucracy, the back office recognized across different sites. Europe is talking about sort of respecting the ethical approvals in other jurisdictions and rolling it out even quicker. And that's where I think Europe is vulnerable. the slowness, the sluggishness, and how different regulations across Europe interface with each other is a challenge.
So at a national level here, you're really talking about more coordination, which the strategy should give a good opportunity for, obviously.
Yep.
But, you know, lots of, if you like, centres of excellence, people of excellence, all sorts of innovation. But maybe, are you kind of saying that there's a more coherent approach needed with everybody? Yes.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely, yeah.
Okay, Pilar, can I come back to you and ask for your reactions to what you've been hearing?
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, I see that we're all really very much in the same wavelength. We see that, and it's pretty obvious that some of the Irish, I would say, concerns or hurdles or challenges or areas for improvement, we can say that they are not unique to you. Although Ireland is well placed in with regards of things like innovations or even skilled workforce, but you're still would benefit also, as it has been mentioned, by perhaps being more active on the clinical trials part, or being also in a way more coordinated. So what I sense here, and what for me is the take-home message, is the readiness and the eagerness of Ireland to really jump on this opportunity and make of this challenge really a significant opportunity, as it was said by one of the speakers, for Ireland in Europe. So I like that type of approach that is not, only looking at the national arena and the national schemes, but also on the European dimension. And this is really, for me, a very important message to take home. So I perceive that this is also the case in other member states, as also has been mentioned by some of the speakers. There are pockets of innovation and pockets of strength in different corners of Europe. And our role and our goal and ultimate objective is to bring all of this together and really boost that part. So I'm really pleased to hear these take-home messages. And indeed, we're really ready to cooperate always with all the member states, and in particularly Ireland. You will have, as it has been mentioned as well, the presidency in the second part of next year. So we're really looking forward working with you, as we have been doing also with the Danish presidency, because you know that they have been extremely active, and they're really pushing for work in the council as well. So it has been mentioned that, and I really have much more to say, but perhaps our time is really running really short. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Pilar. A few very quick questions for you. Do you
Sure.
have a time frame? I'll go through them quickly.
Let's go.
Some of them have come in online. Do you have a time frame for the legislation, the EU legislation? We're wondering particularly how it will, coordinate with the Irish presidency. That's one question. Very quickly,
yes.
For you, Ludwig de Grave has asked, what factors are delaying?
Clinical trials. I saw that in the chat.
Are delaying the deployment of
yes.
clinical trials? Okay, that's the second question. There's another one for you, and that's about, if we want to compete with China and the USA, we need to see a better European single market for life science talent. Innovation to enable a better union of skills. That's from Sean Fay, founder of Whole Village Hiring. So just those three very quickly, Pilar, before I go.
Very quick. Yes, absolutely. So for the time frames, as you have, I will focus on the two more, let's say, regulatory oriented things that I have mentioned. So the revision of the current legal framework for medical devices and in vitro medical devices, it's been currently, really revamped. And the target is to have it proposal put on the table before the end of this year. Then the second thing is for the Biotech Act. there is actually out a call for evidence. So basically, anyone can, bring information or share knowledge or give ideas. So that's something that I would want to just flag to all of you. The tentative, and please again, let's or try to be merciful with me. The tentative idea, it's before the end of 2026. So perhaps we're talking about, having a proposal on the table by the time of the Irish presidency, Q3 maybe. We shall see. Again, please don't take these as a fixed, but this is our goal. So this is with regards of the timelines that have been asked. With regards to the clinical trials, there are myriads of things that make them complicated and difficult. I'm talking, of course, about multi-member states clinical trials. And it would be wise to say that it's not only regulatory concerns, that of course there are regulatory concerns because there are different legislations that apply, and this creates challenges, and they might be also different interpretations by different member states, but there are other issues that are not necessarily only or primarily regulatory. So, for example, education and training and the workforce that has been, mentioned sometimes. So there is a lot of demand for people with experience or really good background on clinical trials and research in the research sphere, and there is not really a good education on that part. So for example, good clinical practices is not something that is mandatory for the healthcare professionals. That's one of the things. There are other things that basically are like the complexity, really the difficulty of all the information that is asked and needs to be revised and assessed. It's really complex. It's a really complex amount of information that is also interpreted in different manners by different member states. So that's very clear. We also have to acknowledge that not all the European countries have the same capacity and participation. So, for example, we see that the EU 13 countries have more limited capacity, and that's something that we really need to boost. There are other issues that there are almost, I'm not saying impossible to fix, but difficult to fix. Access to patients. Sometimes you don't find the patients, so matching the patients with the trials is not linear. So that may also hamper the thing. Finance has been mentioned as well, but also something that I think it is important, publishing negative results. So this is a significant challenge because indeed we need to promote transparency and trust in clinical research. That's something that is not very evident. So just to cite a number of things
Pilar,
that
there's a lot of complexity.
there is a lot of complexity.
And just on
on the skills.
Single market, obviously.
Yes. On the single market, we are proposing, I mean, this is not only for the life science, but in general, there is a proposal called ERA, which basically it's about the European research area. It's what we call the fifth for the single market. We're trying to create a single market also for researchers in Europe, which is, as I say, beyond the life science strategy, and is one of the also flagships for this commission, for our commissioner, Zaharieva.
Thanks very much, Pilar. I'd like to go.
Welcome.
Thank you. Let's see how many questions we have here. Can I get an indication who would like to contribute? Okay, I'm going to take a couple of questions together. So I'll begin over here, and you might say who you are and if you represent an organization. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Avril Kennan. I'm the CEO of Health Research Charities Ireland, so an umbrella organisation for 45 charities together representing about 2 million people. Francis, I'd like to come back to something you said at the start about the public good. And having had a couple of family members in hospital recently, obviously modern medicine has come a long way, but the average hospital experience is very, very far removed from the kinds of things we're talking about today: ATMPs, genomics, clinical trials, even research. So I'm wondering, what do the panel think we can take from the EU strategy and apply it here that is going to change that experience?
Thank you very much. I see two women down at the back there. I'm going to take you.
Vicky McGrath from Rare Diseases Ireland. So we're an umbrella organisation for patient organisations in the country. There's probably a couple of questions that I might have following on what Avril has just said. I wonder, and I think Murs referred to the health budget seen as being kind of like on the wrong side of the books, let's put it that way, not driving innovation. How do we transform our health systems to being drivers of innovation? Because I think that that's ultimately what we need to do. We've managed to achieve that over the last number of decades in terms of universities that don't provide education. They provide everything that we see today. So how do we do the same with our health systems, with our hospitals, with our community care? The role of patients. I think that we're very tied up in health systems, I'm guessing around Europe, but definitely in Ireland, around risk. And risk reward is very different when you're living with a rare disease or when you're in a hospital setting. What does that actually really mean? And why are we killing ourselves over things like that? In terms of Europe, being a small country in Ireland, we don't have enough bums on seats to do all the things that we want to do, that we want to achieve. And how can Europe help small countries? What can Europe do to enable innovation to be adopted? This isn't just around clinical trials and reimbursement, but how do we get more newborn screening? How do AI adoption? How do we get more genetics testing? What can Europe do to make it easier for small countries to do that? Because at the moment, we are struggling to find people to do all of the assessments that need to be done. And then the final thing I would say is I was really interested in what Darren was saying around, and Murs in fairness, around how NIBRT and the CAO, they've all transformed from, certainly when I was doing things like that, the opportunities that are available to, I guess, educate yourself in areas that are applicable to industry. And yet I do feel that our med schools haven't really grown with that type of, let's see what are those innovations that are happening in society and how do we adopt those in medicine.
Now listen, you've asked about 5 questions there. Well, we'll get the panel to do their best. I'm going to take one other question and then go back to the panel, and then I come back to the audience again, conscious of the time. But just very get a flavour of what's on your mind, and I get their best thinking on those questions.
Two very quick things. The first is, it's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to know that we have a life science strategy. I'm coming from Novartis, Evelyn Mulroe, and my question is really around where does the leadership of the life science strategy of the Irish government sits in enterprise at the moment? So how connected is Health Murs with that and with the drivers of that? Just follow what Vicky has just said. And the second question is that connection between your speaker from J&J, I talked a little bit about this fast and fair access. How connected should our life sciences strategy be in that context? Because we look to what's happening across the water in the UK, where there's been moves not to invest in biopharma going forward. And Darren, I'm sure you've been watching that. And all of this is connected to how we value innovation in the ecosystem. So I'm just conscious, I know there's some talk around this at European level, but just in terms of the Irish context, those two. Right, I'm going to stop.
Thank you. Great questions and plenty of scope. Would you like to go ahead?
I can choose the question I answer then, because there were so many of them.
Answer the hardest one.
And I'll try maybe to blend my answer across some of the questions that we heard. And I think the one, that links also to what I was saying, looking at the broader picture, the broader pie, not just the small pharmaceutical budget, but rather the broader healthcare budget. And I think that links also to healthcare modernization and the patient experience in the hospital. There is actually some recent data from OECD that shows that if we would only eliminate half of the ineffective spending in healthcare, we could save 1.2% of GDP. And I know you guys don't use GDP in Ireland, but I know everybody knows what it is, right? So that is enormous. And that is only if we would take out half of the wasteful spending. And if that would then be reinvested in better patient experience, in investing of the innovations of the future, so that we can continue to tackle the diseases we don't tackle well today, then I think that would be an enormous step forward. And I mean, one example, for instance, if I may, bladder cancer, up till now, and we just lost a friend, you know, the only option was bladder removal. I think we're gonna finally enter the 21st century for bladder cancer patients with treatment options. But if we don't invest in those innovations today, then they will not reach the patient. So again, I think that's one of the things I heard. Maybe the small countries, collaboration in Europe, coming from a small country myself, I really think we should indeed, on the centers of excellence, I mean, J&J is very involved in cell therapy as well. We need hospitals that know how to do this, and we shouldn't maybe invest too many resources in making all hospitals being able to do that. So those are collaborations, and would that make sense beyond clinical trials where it absolutely makes sense, where we should build on Europe's strengths. And those are strengths. I mean, our healthcare systems, even if they are under pressure, we are the only region in the world that still has universal health coverage as a general thing. We shouldn't lose that, right? So that is, yeah.
Darren, let me come to you. That sort of, I mean, you can hear a certain frustration, if you like, from the questions about, like, how do we make sure the patient experience, you know, given this, all of the fantastic innovation we're seeing, there are like so much innovation in medicine. We're dealing so much better with so many illnesses, cancers, et cetera, but there's some kind of frustration there about, like, how does all this fit into the broader health scenario, if you like, health budget? I'll ask you as well. But
okay, there was a lot of questions out there,
yes.
and I don't really know where to start, but suffice to say, I'm going to be the contrarian sitting at the end.
Yes, go for it.
I was advocating for manufacturing earlier on, and I think that's important. In this instance, I'm just going to pull on some of my past experiences. So I was a biopharmaceutical person working in commercial clinical trials, market access. I worked on pricing. I worked in funding research with SFI. I worked on funding health research and on health policy with Murish in Health Research Board. Now I'm in manufacturing. And I guess that what I've learned over the years is be careful how you take a bunch of really important, smaller topics and converge them under a banner. Life science strategy is a life science strategy. If you read it, it's a life science strategy to advance European delivery in the life science sector, which society and the economy will benefit from. And in fact, it's reverse order, the economy followed by society. So I would just caution, be careful to take all of the smaller stones and converge them into under that one banner. I'll come back to focus. For me, I think that, you know, you can benefit looking through the lens of what can Europe do to be better at delivering big things. And one of those big things is for patients. It is about better joined upness in the health system. It does come back to what Murish was talking about in terms of health data and coherence there. For Ireland, but I think also for Europe, I think clinical trial infrastructure is absolutely critical, but it's actually very, very much blended across with the health data as well, because there are smart ways of delivering trials, and there's frankly stupid ways of delivering trials, and the world is getting smarter. And actually, you don't need patient cohorts of 1,000 and 10,000. You can do it with 10. But you got to do it smart, and you got to get your genomic data right, and you got to get your kind of more operational data right behind that. But for me, it comes back to focusing, like, pick the big boulders to move first. Forget the pebbles. And the more, I'll be frank, the more noise you get about, well, what about disease area X or disease area Y? I think you can move a lot more if you move the big stones. And I'll go back to the UK example. The UK example has nothing to do with drug pricing in the UK, in my opinion. It's a series of bleeds out of the tire. It's a series of punctures that have been going on for 20 odd years in the UK. It is a system failure in the UK. I hope this is probably being recorded. So it is a system failure.
On the record.
It is a system failure, and it is a system failure that we need to be cautious in the European Union and Ireland, that we don't repeat the same mistake. Concentrate on the big boulders. And you know, patients will benefit at the end of it. And they can probably influence it as well. But the big boulders, and biomanufacturing happens to be one of those boulders. So.
Very, very interesting, Murish, your response to that.
Yeah, the question, yeah.
Interaction, you know, between, if you like, the sector we're talking about here, exactly the point that has just been made by Darren about don't put all the sort of eggs into one basket. Don't blame, if you like, almost the sector if you're not quite getting some of the points that have been made by the questioners right. But it is complex, isn't it? And you're at the center of trying to deal with, you know, every element to that.
Yeah, no, they were great questions, and I think us being coherent nationally is the best way to deliver for Europe and to contribute to the ambitious European agenda. Vicky spoke about how Europe can help small countries, and Avril spoke about looking for the public good. And I do go back to us in still bringing a national health information system to the table, I think is the most urgent thing we need to do. The electronic health records will take a long time to roll out, but there are shared care records that we can do. We're legislating to give the HSE authority to connect data. And I think that population level data is really vital. I think patient as a partner in innovation is really important. In Denmark again, and I'm sort of processing quite a bit of envy coming back from there, but it's all within our own reach, where patients have access to their own health information and can signal sort of a proactive interest in contributing to clinical trials or sort of healthcare evaluations that might be of interest. And Vicky mentioned representing patients with rare diseases, and there's no better example of the value of Europe in kind of scaling up for patients that might be a tiny minority here with, you know, maybe one specialist. Those specialists can connect across the European health data space as well as the patients. And I do think there's huge opportunity. Evelyn asked how connected health is with enterprise, and I'm aware enterprise has traditionally found health frustrating. Like, it's a little bit like what Kissinger calling Europe, who do you phone?
That's within government.
But like we've cultivated Emma Jane Morgan, trained her in health, and implanted her in the Department of Enterprise to ensure that the sector. No, but I think honestly, and something that gives me great sort of job satisfaction. We are good at connecting across departments now.
Yeah.
We really are, and we will display it in the life sciences strategy in the months ahead.
Good to hear that, actually, and also your point about patients and, you know, really opening up the space for the feedback, and at the same time moving ahead on excellence and innovation, as you were saying.
And Francis, our budgets, we are not in the situation you describe of contracting. We have absolute commitment to health, to the discomfort of our Department of Finance.
Super. Doubt about that. Look, we can't give all of the answers, but I think it's been a very interesting reflection. I think there were one or two other people just before we finish up, if that's okay, Barry. Let me just see, woman here, is there someone else? Yes, okay, two people, anyone else? No. So let me take two other questions and then just do a quick round to finish up the discussion.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. It's not so much a question, it's more a comment. And it follows on from the analogy of, you know, breaking down those boulders. What I would say, and all credit where it's due, over the last 12 months, sorry, I should have said, I'm Angela Clayton-Lee, CEO of Cancer Trials Ireland. And over the last 12 months, working with department officials, we've really cracked through a lot of the GDPR barriers. So that is a huge positive that really should be acknowledged. We are poised now in terms of European tiers to really get our time down to about 30 weeks now to start a trial. And that's a huge improvement. We were 2 years ago at around 51 weeks. So what I'd also say, trying to end on a positive note, a huge within cancer clinical trials in Ireland is ironically the size of Ireland. And that's because of the infrastructure and the network of clinicians that exist through Cancer Trials Ireland. 98% are our members. We get them together, we discuss all the trials, the potential worldwide to collaborate and bring more trials in. So actually our size is a strength, and this is called out time and time again when we interact with global pharma and industry. We are in some aspects the envy of Europe because of that network of clinicians that we have. So it's very positive, and it is onwards and upwards, and we're definitely poised to take on the next tier of investment and move forward.
Pilar is listening to that over there in Brussels, and there's a lot of opportunity there. One other question before we finish up.
So Philip Nolan, Maynooth University. The question is, to put it simply, is the big boulder or the big set of boulders or big thing we're missing infrastructures? That in reality, our annual investment in health is not far off what it should be. Our annual investment in research is probably about 60% of what it should be. But what we fail to do is think of infrastructures other than buildings. And to put the question, the big things that we need to focus on to participate are data infrastructures, process infrastructures. We don't invest in people to do the apparently unsexy things that allow research on scale to happen. So that's the question. Is that the big missing piece in the Irish jigsaw?
Take that as the last question. And there was one from Martin Lawler in Open Mind that would take a lot more time. How do the panel feel about siloed thinking? Now, that would take a lot of time to discuss, but I think there's more under the question or the assumption behind the question than needing an answer necessarily. Maybe get a quick concluding comment and a response to that last very interesting point about infrastructure, and obviously there's progress on clinical trials. I'll start with you, Mirsh.
Yeah, I could be quick. Yes, I think Philip is right that we do neglect national level infrastructure, and when you think into the modernization of medicine with full genomic sequencing and that, again, sometimes our pockets of excellence each aspire to be a national center of excellence, and it's kind of to our detriment ultimately. I think a population such as we are, 5.4, approaching 5.5 million, really requires, I think, more top down, so that, like I say, we are a coherent offering then into the bigger European arena.
Okay.
Well, maybe I refrain from commenting on the infrastructure, but maybe my concluding remark would be Johnson & Johnson has been for 80 years in Ireland. We're celebrating the 20 years of our biopharmaceutical plant in Cork this year. We look forward to the Irish presidency, and we hope that the Irish innovation tiger will team up with other countries in Europe where biopharmaceutical innovation is strong, and that we can look at it from a broader perspective. Because at the end, health, I mean, it's what matters for every individual.
For everyone. That's so true, Anouk. Darren.
And I'll just go back to the infrastructure question. I think it's a really, really good question, Philip. And I think that it is one that I wholeheartedly agree with. I do think that Ireland has been very good at a process of kind of bottom-up self-assembly. And we've done it through what I would kind of say is little tranches of funding here and there that really smart people cross-sectorally and cross-institutionally assemble into something. In fact, Cancer Trials Ireland is a really good example of it. Aguar came from just that. History, you go back in the history, all the assembly is. And I think it's long overdue that we get some real coherence on some of the real nuggety topics, top down, and driven by intent, funding, decisiveness. Go back to your terminology, implementation and acceleration through it. And you could pick the topics, but genomics certainly is one of them. You know, that whole area, health data. When I was HRB, Mauritius, you know, we focused very much on kind of that assembly of health data, the disaggregation, the anonymization, that kind of process, which is frankly using technology that's, you know, CSO technology, stats office technology that isn't rocket science. It just needs a bit of focus on and delivery. So fully agree, and there's probably a list a mile long, which we have to prioritize that list as
I mean, it's a great agenda for the new life sciences, you know, strategy, and for the consultation period, and for the varying government departments of responsibility. Pilar, a quick word from you, and then we finish up.
Thank you very much. Now, it's been a lot of interesting, bubbling questions and thoughts. And for me, there is, I've just written it in the, as an answer to one of the questions. There is one of the founding fathers of the European Union, Paul Henry Spaak, said there are only two types of countries, those that are small and those that do not yet, they are small. So it is true that we need to make sure that we as Europe are coherent in what we do and we cooperate and communicate. So for me, what is really thrilling is to hear that you are in the process of really creating the life science strategy. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be very much aligned with ours, and only with cooperation with member states, with the patients associations, with the medical or the healthcare systems and skilled people and the industry can we make of this really convert a challenge into an opportunity for Europe. So that's my take away from the meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pilar, for giving us all of your time today. We're delighted you were able to stay for the entire event and really appreciate the input that you've had here with our other panelists. So on behalf of everybody here, can I thank obviously Pilar, Murish, Anouk and Darren for the agenda setting I think they've done for the new life sciences policy here in Ireland. And thank you all for your questions, for being here today, giving us your time. And finally, well done to the IIEA and Johnson & Johnson for putting this series and today particularly together. And thank you all again for being here. Thank you.